There's a lot more to Brazil than football, coffee and carnivals. We're talking all about Brazil today, so get ready to samba and improve your English at the same time on this episode of
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello, I'm Craig.
And I'm Reza.
And Reza and I are two English teachers with nearly 50 years of teaching English to Spanish speakers. Together, we're going to help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm doing very well, Craig. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and happy to be podcasting again this week. We have a small correction going back to episode 251 in which we spoke about forensic science. And thanks to Angelica, who does the transcriptions for us, you said huellas dactiles, according to Angelica. Do you remember that episode?
Yes, I think I recognize my mistake. Yep, that's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, Angelica rightfully corrected us, and it's actually huellas dactilares, which I didn't know. So thanks very much, Angelica. We're all learning. It's a learning process. So we're improving our Spanish, and hopefully you're improving your English as well. Also, we've had some requests for an update on your building work in the flat. How's it going?
Oh, the building work in my flat. If you've listened to old episodes of the podcast, we've been talking about this for years because I was all talk but no action. I never did it, but I've started now. I am doing up my flat. That means I'm working on it to change it, and it's going well.
Good.
The work was long overdue. Overdue means I should have done it a long time ago.
Ha pasado la fecha.
Yeah. So old listeners of the podcast know that I should have done it a long time ago because we've mentioned it so much. But it's happening. It's nearly finished.
Are you pleased with the builders?
I am. We've got Ukrainian builders. Most of them are Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. There seem to be a lot in the Valencia and Alicante area of Ukrainian workers. Very happy with them. They're very good.
Well, good to hear. Keep us updated in future podcasts. Let's start this week with a voice message from our friend Eurico from Brazil, who's going to Cambridge in the UK to improve his English.
Hi, Greg and Hazan. How's it going? I am Eurico from Belo Horizonte City in Brazil. First of all, congratulations for your fantastic job. I apologize about my last messages. It was terrible. Then I improve my English every day. I have been listening to you guys about few months ago. This year, I gonna go to UK, specifically in Cambridge, for my first exchange. I hope improve my English there. I have one suggestion for you guys about the next episode. Do you guys can speak about Brazilian food, please? Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Eurico, for getting in touch and sending us your voice message. And please don't apologize for your English and for your message. You're practicing, you're speaking, and that's exactly what you need to do. So keep speaking, keep practicing, and step by step, little by little, you will improve. There's one thing that I noticed in your message, and that's the present perfect continuous that you didn't use correctly. You should have said, I have been listening to you guys for about 2 months. Okay, I've been listening to you guys for about 2 months. If you want to use the time expression ago, past simple, go back 2 months. I started listening to you 2 months ago. Reza, did you hear anything else that Eurico could improve?
Eurico, I thought it was a very good message and I understood everything. Although there was a little thing that was definitely wrong. You said, I hope improve my English. You forgot to add to. With hope, it's infinitive with to. I hope to improve my English. And one more little tiny grammar thing. I think you said, Orico, do you guys can speak about Brazilian food? Do you guys? Well, we don't use do with can. When we have a modal verb, can, could, should, must, may, might, all those words, modal verbs, we don't combine them with other auxiliary verbs. No do, no did, no was, no will. Just can you guys speak about Brazilian food? Well, can we speak about Brazilian food, Craig?
We don't know. I don't know that much about Brazilian food, but maybe we could mention a couple of things. Obviously, this episode is about Brazil, and Yuriko's really lucky because he's going to Cambridge. Unfortunately, not everybody can go to the UK to improve English and study English. What can you do, Reza, if you can't travel abroad to improve your English? Can you think of any service that we might know to help people improve their English remotely from home?
Indeed, there's something you can do from the comfort of your own home.
From your own armchair, yeah?
You don't have to go anywhere. All you need to do is get online and check out italki. Italki, what do they do? Well, they offer lessons with a teacher, with a real person online. So you can take the lessons anywhere where you've got an internet connection. You learn from home. So obviously, because it's internet, there are no scheduling, no timetable problems. You learn when it's convenient for you. What you do is check out which teachers are available, how much they charge, their experience. All of this you can find out in their profile. And they charge different prices according to their profile. So you can find the teacher who's best for you. You might even want a particular accent. You might want someone with a typical accent from Cambridge or that part of England. Or you might want an American accent or Australian or whatever you want. You'll find it on italki.
I'm sure if you go to the website and do a search for a teacher, you'll probably find one who lives in Cambridge, who's a native English speaker teaching English in Cambridge. So obviously it's better if you can go to the UK and do a language course there. But if you can't, if you don't have the budget, the presupuesto to do that, why not get in touch with our sponsor italki and study with a remote teacher? There are more details on our website. Go to inglespodcast.com/262. Click on the italki link. And if you sign up through our webpage, italki are offering a $10 free credit when you pay for your first lesson. So there's an idea for studying remotely if you can't afford to go abroad. And Reza and I would like to thank italki for sponsoring Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
We have some more feedback from Brazil. We'd like to say hello to Ewerthon. I hope we're pronouncing that right. Ewerthon Lima, and he's from Goiânia, near Brasilia. And he listens to us on the Spotify platform. Just to remind you that you can now listen to Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig on Spotify.
Yeah, so if you have Spotify on your mobile phone, just search for Inglés Podcast and listen to us on Spotify. Why not?
Now, Ewerthon, he lives in London, although he's from Brazil, and he works as a delivery rider. So he spends a lot of time listening to us on his motorbike as he rides around London making his deliveries.
Be careful not to have an accident as you're listening, Everton. That's quite worrying, especially if you're not paying attention to the road. You could have a nasty accident. So don't ride and listen. Make sure you're doing something safer than riding around delivering stuff and listening to our podcast.
Craig, I think we have even more feedback from Brazil. Is that right?
Yes, there's a lot of listeners in Brazil. Here's Fabian from Brazil, who at the moment is painting houses in New Zealand.
Hi Reza, hi Greg, how are you guys? Hope you're doing well. First of all, thank you for everything, for all your job, everything you've been done, guys. So funny. I have no word to say thank you. I'm Fabiano from Brazil. I'm living in New Zealand for a while. I work as a painter here, so I spend 7, 8 hours per day in front of the wall, painting and sanding. It's a boring job, but after I followed your podcast, it has been changed my life and my English as well. So, guys, I'd like to ask you if it's possible you guys record a podcast talk about my country, Brazil. I think it's gonna be easy to find some good topics like I don't know Amazon, Carnival. I think it's gonna be easy for you. You are the biggest country in the South America, so it's not difficult. So I got something to tell you guys, but please, mom's the word. For me, you are the best podcasters in the world. It's for sure. Bye, guys. Love you so much. Bye bye.
Why don't you invite Fabienne to Valencia to paint your house when you're finished, paint your flat?
Yeah, there's an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do with a painter.
Hey, Fabian, come over to Valencia, paint Reza's flat. It's nearly finished. Thanks for your message, Fabienne. Yes, we're speaking about Brazil. Thank you for your suggestion. Any comments, Reza, on Fabienne's message?
Very good pronunciation, Fabian. And thank you very much for your praise. High praise. Praise is when you say that something is good. We're so happy always to get feedback from as many different countries as we can. And we have quite a few listeners now in Brazil, and we really love hearing from you. So thanks a lot, Fabian.
And I really identified with you listening to podcasts while you're painting, because many years ago, I used to paint houses as well. It was a long time ago. So I know it's a very slow process. You have lots of time. So obviously listening to a podcast is ideal while you're painting, while you're sanding with sandpaper, while you're undercoating. What's undercoat, Reza?
Undercoat is when you put a layer, una capa, a layer of paint before you're going to put the real layer. So the undercoat will probably be white, regardless of the color you're going to put on top of it, to kind of make the wall nice and clean before you put on like the real color on top.
And in English, we speak about putting on coats of paint, C-O-A-T. I think in Spanish it's mano, isn't it? Mano de pintura? Yeah, I think so. So yeah, a coat of paint. If you put 2 coats of paint on, that's 2 layers. So the undercoat goes under the first proper coat of paint. Other words I'm sure Fabian is familiar with: rubbing down, to rub down the walls, to sand and rub down and make the walls smooth. And another thing I remember from my days painting, filling in the cracks. If there's a crack, greta, in the wall, you have to fill it in. That's that phrasal verb, to fill something in. So filling in the cracks before you sand down, undercoat, and then paint.
What do you think then about Fabian's idea of talking about Brazil?
Well, yeah, as you said, it's the largest country in South America and the world's 5th largest country by area and the 5th most populous, which means population-wise, it's the 5th biggest. Over 208 million people living in Brazil. Have you been there? Have you been to Brazil?
I'd love to go, but I've never been. It's something I've got to do very soon. I'm really, really, really interested in visiting Brazil.
Me too. Yeah, I'd love to go. I'd love to go. What's the capital? Because I used to think it was Rio de Janeiro. That gets spoken about a lot, but it isn't, is it?
It isn't. And you're asking the right man, Craig. As someone who as a teenager was obsessed with these trivial facts, I loved finding out things like, where's the capital of? And even what the flags of countries looked like. It was an obsession of mine when I was a kid. So I knew it was Brasilia. And just like I know the capital of Australia is Canberra and all these type of things.
Canada, Ottawa.
Ottawa, not the big cities necessarily. So Brasilia was built, I think, specifically to be the capital. There wasn't really anything there before.
Is it the largest city?
No, no way. It's not that. It's not very big. Brasilia isn't that big at all.
What's the largest?
Oh, by far, Sao Paulo, which is indeed the 2nd largest city in Latin America after Mexico
City.
Sao Paulo is enormous and as a consequence has some of the worst traffic jams in the world.
It also has the largest GDP of any city in the southern hemisphere. What does GDP stand for?
GDP, gross domestic product. Gross domestic product. In other words, how much money industry and services produce in a country.
So I'm sure most people know the official language of Brazil is Portuguese. What do you think of, Reza, when you think of Brazil? What comes to mind?
Well, it's a country, I think, which has some very, very clear and well-known associations. Football.
Yeah.
Anybody who has any interest in football, even the minimum knowledge, knows that Brazil is and always has been one of the best countries in the world for football.
Yeah, and I don't know much about football, but I do know that the Brazilian national football team is the only nation to have won 5 World Cups. So they hold the record for winning the World Cup the most times, the most successful country at football. And I'm not too sure of the stars these days, but I remember watching Brazil back in the day when Pelé was playing. I remember watching Ronaldinho, Zico, Ronaldo, Romario, and of course these days Neymar. I'm not sure where he's playing at the moment, but I know he's still playing somewhere. All of those wonderful footballers obviously come from Brazil, and it's always been a pleasure of mine to watch Brazil play football.
I don't know where Neymar's playing now, but I'm sure that he has played for Valencia. He's played for Valencia, but I don't know where he is right now.
I remember he got injured, but I'm not sure where he is these days because I don't follow football very closely.
There's another word I think of immediately when I think of Brazil, apart from words like Pele, the football player. I think of the Amazon. Who doesn't think of the Amazon when they hear about Brazil? The rainforest, which we need for the world to survive, really.
Have you ever tasted a caipirinha cocktail?
I have. Not very often. It's not a thing I would often order in a bar, but I think it's quite pleasant. I enjoy it.
Me too. I love it. It's the national cocktail of Brazil, and it's made from sugar cane, which I think is called cachaça. It's a very strong liquor, and sugar and lime. It's really refreshing, and it's great in the summer. I love it.
Another thing that I think of immediately when I think of Brazil is capoeira.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I ever saw someone perform capoeira. I had no idea what it was. I was about 18 or 19 years old. I was at university somewhere in the south of England. This was in the 1980s. And I saw a guy who I thought was a bit crazy at the time, an English guy, not Brazilian, fooling about with a berimbau, this kind of long instrument which you hit with a stick and kind of dancing around. So he was into the really, really kind of traditional kind of capoeira. Later, I saw him do kind of all that acrobatic moving about. And I said, why are you playing the berimbau, this instrument? He said, oh, it's a berimbau, blah, capoeira. And he explained it to me. And I said, why are you doing it? And he said, well, because I like it. And also, I'm trying to get it to rain. He said, I don't know if it's true or if he was pulling my leg, tomarme el pelo, but he said, if I play this and move around like this, I'm trying to get the weather to rain.
Wait a second. Where did you see him?
In the middle of Devon.
In Devon, where it rains a lot. Chances are he'd be successful.
I think it did rain about 2 hours later, but as Craig says, that's no surprise in the south of England.
I love watching capoeira because I think, and I'm sure Fabienne and other people from Brazil will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think because it's kind of a mixture of a martial art and a dance. And I think it was because back in the day, they didn't want people to know that they were practicing a martial art. So it was disguised as a dance to the music, but it was actually kind of a self-defense to defend yourself because it's kind of a mix of a martial art and a dance. That's my understanding, but maybe I'm wrong.
That's what I understand as well, yeah. And it has its roots back in Africa because slaves combined kind of their traditional African rhythms and dance with perhaps indigenous South American dances and European things. It's a mixture of loads of things. Loads is a lot.
Mucho.
Loads of things. Mogollon.
Mogollon. And on the subject of music, obviously music is very prominent. It's a very distinctive aspect of Brazil. And doing research for this episode, I noticed a few names that I recognized, and then you added more that I hadn't heard of. So when I think of Brazilian music, obviously I think of the samba, bossa nova, and certain artists like, maybe I'm pronouncing this wrong, Gilberto Gil?
Well, if it's Portuguese, it's going to be Gilberto
Gil. Yeah. I'm sorry. Gilberto Gil. Caetano Veloso. Yeah. Caetano Veloso. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I've got a few of his records.
And Marisa Monte. Those are the main three that I recognized while I was researching. But you've added more. Tell us about those.
Because I'm a big fan of Brazilian music. I love Brazilian music. So I would add Antonio Carlos Jobim, Carlinhos Brown, who I've actually seen play here in Valencia.
Wow.
Daniela Mercury. I'm not such a fan of hers, but I'll mention her because she's famous. Elis Regina, who died quite a long time ago, was a big star in the 60s or 70s. Vinicius de Moraes and Toquinho, who often played together. Milton Nascimento. Apologies for my pronunciation.
Well, no, it sounds really good. I think you pronounce those really, really well. I'm jealous of your pronunciation.
But I love Brazilian music. And because I can speak Spanish, I can figure out quite a lot of what they're saying. It's quite similar to Spanish.
And it's very romantic as well. It's very, very kind of sexy.
As someone who's generally very interested in music, I've always thought that Portuguese, and particularly the Brazilian version of Portuguese, really lends itself to romantic music.
What does it mean to lend itself?
It lends itself. Se presta. It's just perfect. The way the language is constructed, it's just perfect for romantic music. It just works really well. It's not hard to get it to fit.
And when I hear the music, it takes me to a beach in Brazil where people are drinking caipirinhas and they're dancing, and beautiful women and good-looking men dancing on the beach. It's very romantic. I love it.
And of course, then carnivals as well.
Yeah.
You've got the music, you've got the dance. We might as well have a carnival.
The most famous of which, I'm sure you know, in Rio de Janeiro, one of several areas that hold huge carnivals every year, including other cities. Reza, what other places could you expect to see a carnival in Brazil?
Well, this information I did have to check out in Google. I wasn't such an expert as the music. Sao Paulo, unsurprisingly, have a carnival. Also, the one in Bahia is very big as well. But also Minas Gerais, Espírito Santo, and Pernambuco all have their own versions of carnival. But I guess Rio is the one that we stereotypically think of.
And one thing I love is coffee. I'm a big fan of coffee and Brazilian coffee. And Brazil has been the largest coffee producer in the world for over 150 years.
Yes, there's an awful lot of coffee in Brazil.
Can you sing that?
They can click on the link. I'm not singing it.
There's a very famous song, There's an Awful Lot of Coffee in Brazil, that we will link to from YouTube. You can go listen to that, practice your English and sing along with, is it Frank Sinatra?
Yeah.
In the show notes. That can be found at inglespodcast.com/262. So go listen to the song and sing along.
Now, we've talked about the most obvious things that come to mind. That means they come quickly into your thoughts about Brazil. But we also investigated, we looked into a few more kind of fun facts, interesting facts that you might not know about Brazil.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that Brazil has an island that has so many snakes, serpientes, that it's too dangerous for humans to visit. Have you heard of that place, Fabian? It's called... Yeah, can you say it, Reza? I can't pronounce that.
I'm guessing Ilha Queimada Grande.
Ilha Queimada Grande. It has one snake per meter, apparently, and it's populated by the venomous golden lancehead snake. So that's one island I will not be visiting when I eventually make it to Brazil.
There's an awful lot of snakes on that
There's
island.
an awful lot of snakes in Brazil on that island. Yeah, and that's not for me.
Now, we spoke about the Amazon rainforest, but here's some specific information about it, which might surprise you. It surprised me. It's home to more than 40,000. That's a lot, eh?
Wow.
40,000 species of flora, 2,000 species of fish, over 400 species of both mammals and amphibians. They're animals which live in land and in water, amphibians, and almost an equal number of reptiles and 2.5 million insects. That's 30% of Earth's flora and fauna, about a third. It's all in the Amazon rainforest.
Well, they do say that the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the world. The lungs of the world, pulmones, because of the trees and the variation of flora there. So incredible. We spoke earlier about sugarcane being an ingredient of caipirinha, and ethanol is also made from sugarcane. It's a renewable source of energy because ethanol is derived from plants, and the production and combustion completes a cycle. So Brazil runs most of its cars on ethanol. I think 92% of all new cars that are sold use ethanol as fuel for the engine. That I didn't know, and that's very, very impressive to me.
Wow, 92%.
Yeah.
Ooh. Here's another statistic, also about the Amazon, but now the river Amazon, which of course flows through the rainforest. But did you know that it has the largest water flow of all rivers? It's not the longest river, that's the Nile, but it has the largest water flow, flujo, of all rivers. 12,540,000 cubic meters of water every minute.
It's hard to imagine that, isn't it? It's hard to imagine that number.
That's an awful lot of water.
There's an awful lot of water. There's an awful lot of water in Brazil.
And imagine all that water. Incredibly, I discovered just this week that it used to fluir, in the opposite direction. So we've had flow as a noun, flujo, and now to flow as a verb, fluir. In the opposite direction. That's right. It flowed into the Pacific Ocean, and that was before the Andes Mountains were formed, so many thousands of years ago.
So you're going back a long, long, long time, yeah?
Thousands of years ago. Mm-hmm. Because then the Andes Mountains formed in the west of South America, mm-hmm. and that blocked the river. So it slowly started to change, and it started to go back the other way, and now it flows into the Atlantic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And not only that, as I said, it's the second longest river in the world, nearly 4,000 miles. There are no bridges over the river Amazon.
Not one.
Not one. How can a river be 4,000 miles and have no bridge? Well, the answer is because most of it is in the rainforest, and there's no real need for any bridges.
No roads, no trains, yeah. Makes sense.
No, not a single bridge over the river Amazon exists.
Did you know that the world's best beach can be found in Brazil? This is according to TripAdvisor. Baía do Sancho, in the archipelago of Fernando de Noronha. Did I say that right?
Noronha, I think.
Noronha. Fernando de Noronha. It's a marine park that has whales and sharks and parrotfish, clownfish. That's Nemo, isn't it? The clownfish. And turtles. So the best beach in the world, according to TripAdvisor, is also in Brazil.
Wow, I'd heard of all those animals except a parrotfish. I'd never heard of that before, but it doesn't surprise me that Brazil has that because it also has a lot of parrots, the type that fly in the air. So I'm not surprised to hear it even has parrotfish.
I wonder if it repeats what you say to it.
Oh, yeah. The
thing is, you can't understand it. Brazil has more than 4,000 airports. Wow. That's more than any other country other than the US, which has 13,500. So 4,000 airports in one country. That's amazing.
Now, as I'm sure everybody knows, they speak mostly Portuguese in Brazil. But did you know that there are more than 220 languages or dialects in total in Brazil today?
No, I didn't.
220 at least. But it's estimated that before the Portuguese explorers arrived, it might have been more like 1,000, so even more before. And here's another interesting fact. As well as official indigenous languages, the ones which were there always since there's been human life there, such as, let me see if I pronounce it correctly, Nihingato. Nihingato, you can check the spelling in the notes. As well as those indigenous languages, there are other European languages apart from Portuguese which have official status in some areas, including German dialect, which is only spoken in Brazil. It's not even spoken in Germany anymore, and it's official, and Japanese.
Wow.
I've taught a Japanese Brazilian. I taught a student once in Belfast working at the university, and he was Japanese looking, and he had a Japanese name. Let's say his name was, I don't know, Ken. I said, hello, Ken. And he's like, hello, Reza, how are you? I was like, well, that doesn't sound like a Japanese accent. He said, no, I'm from Amazonas. I thought he was pulling my leg, and then I discovered, no, he was with the Brazilian group. And not only that, but he was from near the Amazon area. There are a lot of Japanese people in the Amazonas province.
So there's an awful lot of Japanese in Brazil.
Yeah, who would have thought it? Incredible.
Yuriko asked us to mention food. So what's a national dish of Brazil, Reza, seeing as your pronunciation's much better than mine?
Ooh, I wouldn't say it's much better, but it just so happens.
You know how to say this.
Well, I've eaten it.
Have you?
Yeah. Feijoada.
What is it? What's in it?
It's a stew, that's estofado in Spanish, of beans. Well, there's a picture of things. Beans, beef and pork. Usually there's some rice as well. Quite a lot of things go into it. It's very, very heavy, very filling, and very, very, very nutritional. Very, very, very good for you and very tasty.
It sounds similar to that dish from Asturias with beans. Fabada?
Fabada, Asturiana.
Yeah, sounds similar.
It is something similar, yeah.
Is it nice?
Lovely. I highly recommend it.
Now, in Brazil, there are some favelas, which in English we might say shanty towns. A shanty town, Shanty. They've become very popular in recent years as tourist attractions. Reza, do you happen to know anyone that might be able to guide visitors around the favelas of Rio de Janeiro?
I certainly do. I think you won't find anybody better than Bruno. Bruno, our gold sponsor on Patreon. Bruno does walking tours of two places, of Copenhagen in Denmark, but also of the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. And if you're interested in his walking tours, you can go to his website, which you can find at favelawalkingtour.com.br. BR stands for Brazil. Or if you want to check out Denmark, Copenhagen, go to copenhagenwalkingtour.com. As for the walking tours in the favelas, it's very important that you should know that it's safe, because the favelas have a reputation as being a bit rough, a bit hard, but they're safe. You go with professional guides, and it helps the community to improve their daily needs. So some of the money goes back into helping the local community in the favelas.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for being a gold sponsor on Patreon. Well, now it's your turn to practice your English. Is there a country that you would like to hear about? And do you enjoy the episodes that we do occasionally that are focused on a country? If you do enjoy them and you'd like us to do more, please send us a suggestion and we will try to include it in a future podcast. You could send us a voice message on speakpipe.com. That's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. Reza, how can people reach us by email?
You could email me, belfastreza@gmail.com, or Craig @inglespodcast.com.
And we'd like to thank all our patrons who are supporting the show and helping us to transcribe every episode. You can join our Patreon program for a minimum of $1 per month, and you get instant access to recent transcriptions, lovingly transcribed by our friend Angelica. go to patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And we have some new Patreon supporters joining us this month. Who are they, Reza?
Our latest supporters are Jaime Gallego, Kendi Aparecido Osiro, Dani Palacios, Javier Ruiz, Jose Ignacio, Ile Champs, and Ramon Roldan.
Thank you to all of you new people who are joining the program and to our regular Patreon supporters. On next week's episode, we answer Luigi's question, how can a Spanish speaker who's living abroad integrate well into British culture? That's next week. Thank you very much for listening this week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
Ate logo.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.